One of the biggest challenges when starting a new role is getting up to speed with everything that you need to know as quickly as possible. So today I'm going to walk through the best method to do that using AI as an enhancer to make sure that you're up to speed with everything for your role so you can jump straight in and get to work. Now we're going to use a two-part process here. Firstly, we're going to look at all the data that we might have access to and how we might clean that so that we can actually use it to generate the different tools that we want. And then the second part is the more exciting part where we actually do the generation and see what we can actually produce with AI. Now the AI tool I'm going to use today is NotebookLM. I really like this for different multimedia aspects, and I'll show you exactly why that's the case when we get to that part. But before we get started, let me just show you where to go to get the downloadable file. So if you go to the Meander Talent Academy website, in the resources section, you can see all the resources that we have here for our free videos. There'll be a brand new one in the featured section when this is launched. Just download that and away you go. If you do want to go a little bit further, you can have a look at all the different courses that we offer. We just launched a new headcount and capacity planning course, which is designed for HR leaders. So it doesn't go into as much detail as you would normally expect. And is actually really designed to kind of give you everything you need to know to have those conversations in leadership meetings. Let's get started by actually looking at what's in the file that you can download. So once you've unzipped it, put it into a folder, and you'll see there's a whole bunch of different files in here. And I'm going to walk through what each one is going to do as we go through the video. So the two ones that we want to start with are the prompts module, which is a PDF, and that's just going to give you some of the basic prompts that we're going to use later. And then we have the two folders here, the data and the source documents. Now in the data, what you'll see is a list of all the different files that would usually come from exports. As you're getting up to date in a new role, you probably want to pull in information from any kind of headcount planning, maybe your HRIS, maybe your ATS, maybe your comp tool, maybe engagement surveys. So all this kind of like raw source data that you might have access to, assuming that you can extract it. It's probably good to just get that out and put it into a CSV so that you can start to play around with it. If you're going to do some of that analysis yourself, you can join all the tools together, and actually in some of our courses we walk through how to do that. But we're not actually going to go into that today. Instead, we're just going to take a quick look at the data set. Here's two of them, the roster headcount and the compensation data set. So in the roster, you can see we've got names, locations, titles, start dates, termination dates. We've got the currency that they get paid in. So there's a whole bunch of different information in here. And depending on where this information sits, depends on actually how we could potentially use this moving forward. And so for a lot of locations, we might not actually be able to use the name and upload it to the cloud to actually run some AI analysis on it. So we're going to solve that problem, but more critically, we're also going to solve the problem of the compensation data, because what you'll see is that the comp data can be tied directly to an individual, and that is definitely something that you don't want to be leaking either to your internal employees or to the market. And because that is generally kind of confidential information that you want to kind of maintain. If we go back and look at the source documents folder, what I've done is actually generated some samples that you might get during a handover. So there's a couple of PowerPoint presentations, a couple of Word documents, and we'll dig into those now. So for the PowerPoints, we're assuming that you've started in a role, and as part of your onboarding process, you've been handed these two documents. These are very kind of light, high-level documents just for demonstration purposes, but there's a confidential 2026 workforce plan, which contains some of the priorities. Now this, in some cases, might contain like a reduction in force or plans for things that are not public and certainly not communicated to an internal audience. And so this is something that is confidential. You don't want to kind of give this information to anyone that shouldn't already have it. Same with the board deck that's right here. This is a people and talent review where you may actually be, again, looking at potentially downsizing the organization, and that's going to require a long communication plan. And so that's not something you want to kind of communicate quickly. And so the other two files are your handover documents. And so in here, we've got the transition brief. These are generally highly confidential because it often includes opinions from the person that you're handing over from about certain people in the organization. It's going to name specific names, problems that those people are having. Again, this is something that you don't want anyone to get their hands on. So it's going to be really critical that you make sure this is clean before it leaves your private desktop. And then finally, there's the People Policies Handbook. Generally, these are less sensitive, but it may contain some information that you don't necessarily want to get out into the public market, especially if you're a large organization. So it's important to just make sure that you're reading through those and making sure that all of the critical information is going to be redacted before you actually upload that. All of a sudden, you can see we've got 5 spreadsheets, we've got 2 PowerPoint presentations, 2 Word docs, and so already it's actually quite a lot of material. Now, if you taking over a much bigger role and actually looking a little further back, you've probably got lots and lots of different material that's coming in, and it may not be practical to actually go through and manually redact all the sensitive information yourself, especially if you're new in role and you're trying to get up to speed with your team, trying to go on all the coffee chats and the one-on-ones that you need to do in order to understand the organization. What we're going to do is accelerate that process a little bit. I've actually created a script that you can run. You can run this locally, assuming you have Python installed on your machine, which most do. It's fairly easy to run. And what it's going to do, if I load up the README file, we'll open preview, you can see what it does is it actually takes the data set that we have here and it screens locally. And what that means is it's actually not going to upload any of that data beyond your machine, but it's going to go through each one of those files and redact all the information that is potentially critical there, because you don't want to put anything in the cloud that you don't know is fully secure, especially if you don't know that the cloud instance that you're working with is fully secure. You can read the full README file here, but all I'm going to do is just paste this kind of one script into here, and you see what it does is it reads through all the documents, so these 9 documents that we just walked through, and it gives you the number of flags that it found in that document, whether you should be uploading it or whether you want to redact something. And what you'll see it's then done is created a screening report. So we can preview this now and actually look at what this is giving us. So again, it's showing us where it's picking up sensitive information and what it cares about. And what it's actually done for us is regenerated clean files. Okay, so we've now got through the process where we've got all our Handover docs, we've got all these different data sources, we've cleaned them up so we can actually use them with AI. So how do we actually get the Handover notes into a format that's going to give us some critical information? And this is where I get most excited, because what we can now do is actually go back to our NotebookLM and actually create a new project in here. So all I've done just to get this started, because some of this process takes a little bit of time, is create a new project in NotebookLM and then uploaded all the clean files that we just generated here. We know these are clean, we know we're not going to give any sensitive information. We can move this to the side. We can take a look at the prompt file that we generated, and all we're doing is copying and pasting the prompts that are in here just to give us an idea of what we could potentially do with this information. So the first one I did was I asked, give me a 1-page briefing on the company, what it does, the headcount locations, etc. And you can see here that what it's actually done is gone through the document. So the good thing about NotebookLM is it's less likely to hallucinate, because it's using the source documents and only giving you information based on the documents that you fed into it. And you can actually do this with projects, but there's still a risk of hallucination. With NotebookLM, you can actually just query the files that you have there. So it's gone through and it's given us all the information here. The next thing I wanted to highlight, and it is at the bottom of this prompt sheet here, is one of the more sensitive topics: who's a flight risk and what is everyone paid? Now, when we ask this question, what we're actually going to see is that this actually took a long time to go through, because the model was confused as to why it didn't have individual compensation data. So much of the information was redacted. And so what it's done is it's tried its best, but it's not been able to give us individual flight risk, because we redacted that information when we cleaned up the source data. So it's given us field operations and engineering, just looking at engagement scores. So again, that's not something that's highly sensitive, and so that's probably quite helpful information. Individual flight risk, it's just giving us the titles. Again, this is coming from the Handover document, so we actually have that in here. And again, what we can then do is go back to our confidential document that's not redacted and try and figure out who are these people, so that we actually get a better understanding. But at a very high level, this is giving us the information we need. What is everyone paid? It explains that a lot of the information it has is now redacted, but it can give us kind of leveled bands and currency distributions and things like that. So it's not giving us the exact information for the more sensitive side of things, because we know we've pulled it out, but it is actually able to give us some rough estimates. This is a really good way to kind of query the data, but what I actually want to do is focus on the prep documents that I think are going to be really helpful to get you up to speed, so you're not just using a chatbot. And what we're going to do is actually use the tools on the side here. And so if you go into the studio section, you'll see there's a whole bunch of different things that you can do here. And I've giving you some prompts to play around with in section E in the prompt document. So the first one we've done is actually asked for a one-page first week briefing memo. And what I've done here is actually use the infographic. So when you click on this button here, you actually just drop the prompt into this box at the bottom. You can actually play around with the design and everything. But once it's generated, it gives you something that is very interesting and potentially a really useful way to internalize that information. And so here's my first week briefing as a one-pager. It's giving me the global headcount, it's giving me attrition, it's giving me headcount by location. And so we're not necessarily having to go into the weeds on the data. This is just giving me the kind of one page, what do I need to know? But we know that we've removed sensitive information. But having this on the desktop to refer back to may be a better way to learn what's happening in the organization. So that was the first thing. Next thing is the audio overview. And this is one of my favorite things to do with NotebookLM. Because what you can do is on this audio side, you can actually generate a podcast based on the information that you fed into it. And so with the data that we have, we've actually just asked it to generate an audio overview to listen to on your commute. So you can actually just play this and we can see that what's actually been generated is, I'm going to press play, is an 11-minute podcast that's actually going to brief us on all of the information that we've put into it. And so we can actually understand that data a little bit more. And then finally, draft the 10 smartest questions to ask the CHRO. So, week 2, you've got your first meeting with the CHRO. You want to be able to ask them things that are going to be really helpful. And so what I've done here is actually use the slide deck feature. Again, just dropping the prompt into the box here. And we can see that we have then generated like 10 questions with data. We're probably not going to give this presentation, but it's a good way of visualizing it for ourselves so that we can actually prep better for that one-on-one with the CHRO, kind of going through some of the kind of critical things that we may be concerned about going into that first one-on-one meeting. All right, so that's everything. Hopefully this is going to be really helpful for you to get up to speed very quickly in a new role. If you're actually interviewing for a role, this is a good way to use public data to be able to ask more intelligent questions when you get through to final round interviews, especially if you're going to be talking to the hiring manager. You can actually pull in things like investor reports, you can pull in LinkedIn profiles of key personnel. So any public data source can actually just drop straight in because there's a little less sensitivity with that information. And you can actually do the same thing, generate your prep docs, interrogate the data using a very simple kind of chat interface. It doesn't require a whole lot of kind of technical know-how to get you up to speed. And if there's anything else that you want to see, please just drop it into the comments below. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.